Investigator third rank Vassal had been handed worse complaints. He reminded himself of this as he scrolled through the human woman submission file, which ran to 412 pages and included 17 hand-drawn diagrams of pipe drainage patterns. 412 pages from a single human about a water table. He set the file down on his desk in the Administrative Review Bureau of Castle Station and looked out the partition window at the processing floor below, where clerks of 7 species moved between terminals, and thought, "This is going to be a very short week." The human's name was Mara Celis. Her title, as listed on the submission header, was Environmental Compliance Liaison, 3rd tier, unaffiliated, meaning she held no credentials recognized by the Interstellar Regulatory Compact. She had been living at Talos Reach, a human colony settlement on the moon Cerevis Roman 4, for 2 years. Her complaint alleged that automated mining operations run by the Castle Drell Industrial Consortium, one of the largest extraction entities licensed under the compact, had discharged chemical tailings into the subsurface water shelf beneath Talos Reach. She claimed the discharge had continued for 14 months. She claimed it had sickened the settlement's water supply. She claimed she had the data to prove all of it. Vassal had seen complaints like this before, from colonists who smelled something strange and concluded a conglomerate was trying to kill them. He had reviewed 17 such complaints in the last 4 years. 16 had been dismissed at intake. 1 had resulted in a corrective notice and a fine amounting to roughly 0.1% of the consortium's quarterly operating profit. He flagged the file for a routine preliminary review, logged a projected closure date of 6 days out, and went to the canteen for his morning meal. He came back to find a message from Director Principal Arath waiting on his terminal. The message noted that the Castle Drell Consortium had already submitted a formal response to the Celis complaint, without Vassal having notified them that a complaint existed. The response ran to 80 pages and concluded that the allegations were without merit, the methodology was non-standard, and the author held no credentials recognized by the compact. Vassal read that message twice. Consortium legal responses did not typically arrive before the reviewing officer had even opened the file. He noted this and began the preliminary review. He called up the Colonial Health Registry for Talos Reach. He expected to find the ordinary noise of a frontier settlement, seasonal respiratory complaints, a gastrointestinal outbreak or two, the minor ailments that came with establishing human habitation on a moon that had not previously been inhabited. What he found was a spike: 41 cases of gastrointestinal illness in the settlement's last 4 months, 11 cases of peripheral neuropathy, 3 hospitalizations, 1 death, an elderly man, ruled as pre-existing cardiac condition, though the attending notes flagged unusual blood chemistry. He pulled up the water quality reports that the mining consortium was required to file with the compact quarterly. The reports showed clean readings, every quarter. Perfect numbers, filed in perfect time, signed off by a consortium environmental officer whose name was Drev Ossian. Vassal cross-referenced Ossian's credentials. Drev Ossian had been licensed as a compact environmental officer 6 years ago. His license had lapsed 16 months ago and had not been renewed. He sat back. He pulled Mara Celis' 412 pages back onto his screen. She had organized them carefully. The first 60 pages were the health data he had just found, annotated with sources. Pages 61 through 140 were water sampling results, not from the consortium's official monitoring points, but from 14 locations Celis had identified herself across the settlement's well system. She had labeled every sample jar, recorded every GPS coordinate by hand, submitted samples to 3 independent laboratories on 2 different worlds. The lab results matched across all 3. The water contained elevated arsenic, selenium, and a set of organic sulfur compounds that had no natural source in Cerevis Roman IV geology. Pages 141 through 240 were Celi's geological analysis. She had cross-referenced public geological survey data with the consortium's licensed extraction zones and worked out the subsurface drainage angles by hand, using, as she noted in a footnote, the drainage modeling software available in the public library at Talos Reach Administrative Block, version 3, which runs a bit slow but gets there. She had calculated where the tailings discharge would have to enter the water table to produce the contamination pattern she had found, and she had circled the location on a diagram. Consortium Extraction Shaft 7, licensed under Compact Permit KD 441S. Pages 241 through 320 were a timeline, built from consortium public filings, colonial utility records, and her own notes, cross-indexed by date. The contamination pattern in the well samples began 14 months ago. Extraction Shaft 7 had commenced operations 14 months and 3 weeks ago. Pages 321 through 412 were communications, purchase orders, supply manifests, a freight invoice for a chemical compound used in a specific type of drilling fluid stabilizer, notes from 3 meetings Celi's had attended at the colony's administrative office, where she had raised her concerns and been told the water was fine. A written response from the consortium's regional liaison, dated 8 months ago, informing her that her methodology was non-standard and her credentials were not recognized by the compact. At the bottom of the last page in plain text, Celi's had written, "I am not a certified anything. I am a person who lives here. The people in this settlement are sick. These are the numbers." Vassal had been an investigator for 11 years. He had closed 16 of 17 complaints at intake. He had, over those years, developed a reliable professional instinct for the cases that were noise and the cases that were signal. This was not noise. He requested a site inspection at Talos Reach and filed a formal hold on the consortium's response, which meant the consortium could not close out the complaint on procedural grounds while the review was active. The next morning, Director Principal Arath called him into her office. Arath was a tall, elongated bureaucratic cast, the same species as Vassal, with the gray-silver coloring of a senior administrator and the expression of a being who had learned to convey disapproval through stillness rather than volume. She told him that the Castle Drell Consortium was a major licensed entity contributing substantially to the compact's extraction revenue, that the Celi's complaint had been characterized to her office as an unqualified harassment filing, that Vassal's hold had generated calls to the Bureau's Oversight Council, and that she expected this matter to be resolved efficiently. Vassal said he was planning to resolve it efficiently. Arath said that was good to hear. She also noted, before he left, that the Bureau maintained productive relationships with licensed extractors across 18 star systems, and that distinguishing genuine regulatory failures from frontier colonists misinterpreting normal industrial activity was a core professional skill. Vassal said he would apply it carefully. He went back to his desk and looked again at Drev Ossian's lapsed license number, at the quarterly water report signed under that credential, and at the consortium's response that had arrived before the review was opened. The 17 hand-drawn drainage diagrams were more useful than the 80 pages of legal prose. 2 days after that, Consortium Counsel filed a supplemental brief arguing that Celi's geological analysis was inadmissible because her modeling software was not certified for regulatory use. Vassal checked the 3 precedents it cited. 2 were accurate. The third had been overturned 4 years ago by a ruling council had not mentioned. He noted this and continued. What Celi's had not included in her 412 pages was any account of how the past 8 months had felt. She had kept it entirely to the data. Vassal found that, in its own way, the most informative thing in the file. He flew to Cerevis Roman for 6 days later. Mara Celis met him at the landing pad. She was younger than he had expected, late 20s by human reckoning, in worn field gear, carrying a shoulder bag that clinked with sample jars. She shook his hand and thanked him for coming and did not say anything else. She did not explain herself. She did not apologize for the 412 pages. She simply handed him a site map and started walking. She took him to 14 sampling points over the course of the day. At each one she showed him her previous readings, and he ran the Bureau's own field assay kit alongside her jars. The Bureau's kit returned the same results her independent labs had returned. By the 4th location, he had stopped being surprised by this. By the 8th, he had stopped being skeptical. By the 10th, he was matching her readings against the geological model in his case file, and finding that everything aligned exactly where she said it would. Her drainage calculations, run on the public library's version 3 software, placed the contamination source to within 40 meters of the actual discharge points. At the 9th sampling point, a community well at the center of the settlement's 2nd residential ring, he noticed the hand-lettered sign posted above the pump handle. "Do not drink. Boil only." The sign had been there long enough that the ink had faded at the edges. He took the 9th sample and said nothing about the sign. He asked Celis how she had learned to run the geological modeling. She said she had taken 2 online courses from a university extension program, and that a retired hydrological engineer in the settlement had confirmed the drainage calculations. He asked who the engineer was. She said his name was Baron Aldous, that he had worked in planetary water systems for 30 years before retiring to Talos Reach with his family, and that he was currently one of the 11 neuropathy cases. She said it without inflection. She was not asking for sympathy. She was giving him a data point. Vasil did not say anything for a moment. They were standing at the 14th sampling point, a hand-dug well at the edge of the settlement's oldest residential block. The afternoon light came in flat and pale across the moon's rocky surface. A child was watching them from a window in the nearest building. He looked at the assay kit reading, then at the diagram in Celis' field folder, then at the horizon where Shaft 7's ventilation towers were barely visible in the distance. The numbers did not require interpretation. They were simply true, the same as they had been in the file and in the lab reports from 2 worlds and in every well she had tested. He thought about the consortium response that had arrived before he opened the file, and the overturned precedent council had neglected to mention, and Celis bringing these same numbers to the colony administration 3 times and being told the water was fine. The settlement was not large, roughly 300 people. He had passed the school building on the way in. He told Celis he needed to see extraction Shaft 7. The consortium site manager at Shaft 7 was a smooth-skinned humanoid named Prassel who met them at the perimeter fence with a legal representative and a great deal of confidence. Prassel said the shaft was operating within all permitted parameters. The legal representative produced the quarterly water quality reports signed by Drev Ossian. Prassel said access to the operational area would not be granted without a formal inspection warrant, and that the Bureau's review process did not, in his understanding, authorize warrants at this stage. Vasil produced the warrant. He had filed for it 2 days after opening the Celis file. The legal representative looked at it. Prassel looked at the legal representative. The consortium site manager went noticeably quiet. The inspection of Shaft 7 took 4 hours. Vasil's field team found the discharge points exactly where Celis had marked them, following drainage angles calculated on the public library's version 3 software. They found a secondary drainage channel not disclosed in any compact filing. They found maintenance logs showing that a primary containment seal had failed 11 months ago and been patched internally, also not disclosed. They found, in a locked operations cabinet that required the warrant to open, a copy of an internal audit conducted by the consortium's own environmental division 8 months ago. The cabinet also held a hand-annotated copy of Celi's original complaint. The margin notes did not dispute her data. They discussed which sections of her analysis were most likely to survive procedural challenge, and how long a compact review could be expected to take. The audit was 46 pages. It concluded that Shaft 7's containment systems were compromised, that discharge into the regional water table was probable, and that remediation should begin immediately. The audit had been marked internal, not for regulatory submission, and filed away 8 months ago. While 41 people fell ill and Baron Aldis developed peripheral neuropathy, and Mara Celis rebuilt her drainage model for the 3rd time in the public library. Vossel photographed every page. He photographed the drainage channel and the maintenance patch. He sent everything to the Bureau's secure file server before leaving the building. Prassel said nothing during the final 2 hours of the inspection. The formal findings report ran to 280 pages. Vossel submitted it 8 days after the inspection, alongside a referral to the Enforcement Division, a recommendation for immediate license suspension, a credentials referral for Drev Ossian, and a flag on the suppressed audit for a document concealment review. The consortium's response asserted procedural irregularities and over-reliance on non-certified methodology, specifically the work of Mara Celis, who held no credentials recognized by the compact. A separate communication to Director Principal Arath suggested that Vossel's judgment had been compromised by an unqualified source and requested a senior panel review before any enforcement action. Arath forwarded that communication to Vossel without comment. He added it to the file and submitted his reply directly to the Enforcement Division. His reply to the consortium was 2 sentences. He noted that the Bureau's own certified equipment had replicated every finding in Celi's original file, and that the suppressed internal audit was a consortium document, not Celi's. Castle Drell's operating license for Shaft 7 was suspended within the month. Remediation of the Cerevis Roman 4 water table began 6 weeks after that. The consortium agreed to fund health monitoring and treatment for every affected resident at Talos Reach for a period of 10 years. Director Principal Arath reviewed the case file after closure. She did not call Vossel into her office. She sent a brief message noting that the matter had been handled thoroughly and that she had updated the Bureau's intake criteria to flag complaints accompanied by independent laboratory corroboration and a geological correlation model, regardless of the filer's credential status under the compact. It was, Vossel thought, a reasonable change. He looked once more at the last page of Mara Celis' original submission before archiving the file. He had read it the first time in his office at Castle Station on what he had imagined would be a very short week. He read it again now. She had written, "I am not a certified anything. I am a person who lives here." He filed the case, turned off his terminal, and went home. The water in Talos Reach tested clean by the end of the following year. Baron Aldis attended the settlement's commemoration of the cleanup completion. So did Mara Celis. Neither of them gave a speech. There was nothing, really, that needed to be said.